Just before dawn, somewhere in Mexico, a man lies back on a narrow bed and lifts his phone. The room is dim, anonymous. Hotel or motel, it's hard to tell. His chest fills the frame. A lion tattoo stretches across it, bold and unmistakable. The photo is intimate, careless. The kind of image people only take when they believe they are untouchable. Months later, that photo will appear in an FBI press release. The man is Ryan Wedding, former Canadian Olympic snowboarder, alleged drunk kingpin, and one of the most wanted fugitives in the world. The FBI believes the image was taken sometime the previous summer. Where exactly, they won't say. Only that it was likely Mexico and that he is still out there. By now, the manhunt has gone public. New photos circulate alongside older ones. Ryan Wedding with a shaved head, Ryan with a beard, Ryan thinner, then heavier. The FBI wants people to study his face, his size, his posture. 6'3", over 230 pounds. A man who should be impossible to miss, and yet for more than a decade no one has caught him. The reward climbs to even $15 million, enough money to erase loyalty, enough to make anyone around him hesitate. The FBI releases the images not because they are close, but because they aren't. This is what law enforcement does when surveillance runs out, and pressure becomes the last tool left. Behind the scenes, investigators believe Ryan Wedding is protected, not hiding alone, but shielded by networks that move cocaine the same way corporations move cargo. Routes from Colombia into Mexico, from Mexico into Los Angeles, from there north into Canada and across the Atlantic. According to US prosecutors, tens of tons a year, billions of dollars, multiple murders ordered to keep the machine running. To hear federal officials tell it, Ryan is not just another trafficker. He's described as a modern echo of the great drug lords, because this isn't the story of a man who grew up with nothing. Ryan Wedding didn't come from poverty or desperation. He came from privilege, from ski hills and coaching networks, from national teams and Olympic villages, from a life built on discipline, funding, and opportunity. He once represented his country on the world's biggest stage. Now that same country watches as his face appears on wanted posters instead. Somewhere between those two lives, something broke. You see, Ryan Wedding was born in 1981 in Thunder Bay, Ontario, into a world where snow defined the rhythm of his family's life. His grandparents ran a ski hill. His father was both a racer and an engineer, someone who understood speed not as thrill, but as a system that could be studied, refined, and controlled. His uncle coached the Canadian women's national alpine ski team, so excellent on snow was expected. His parents could afford equipment, travel, coaching, and time to train, time to fail, time to try again. That financial cushion removed urgency from his decisions. He didn't have to choose safe paths, he could afford to explore extremes. What separated him from other gifted kids wasn't raw talent alone, it was fear, or rather, the absence of it. Coaches and peers noticed it early. Where other young athletes hesitated, Ryan didn't. He didn't flinch at steep drops or high speeds. He didn't second-guess risky lines, but this wasn't recklessness. He wasn't sloppy or impulsive. His calm under pressure was deliberate, almost clinical. He assessed risk, then committed fully. That distinction mattered. Fearless athletes often burn out, calculated ones advance. By his early teens, it was obvious he was different. He moved with the confidence of someone who assumed he would land on his feet, because up to that point, he always had. In an environment built to reward precision, discipline, and nerve, Ryan Wedding thrived. Long before law enforcement would describe him as elusive or dangerous, he was already displaying the trait that would define his entire life, an ability to move fast, stay composed, and operate without hesitation, convinced that whatever came next, he could handle it. Ryan Wedding's move to British Columbia placed him exactly where he needed to be. The terrain was tougher, the competition deeper, and the expectations higher. He advanced quickly. By his mid-teens, he had earned a spot on the Canadian national team. Junior world medals followed, confirming what coaches already believed, which was that he was on a clear path to the top of the sport. In 2002, that path led to Salt Lake City. Wedding competed in the men's parallel giant slalom at the Winter Olympics, the culmination of more than a decade of focused training. For most athletes, simply qualifying would have marked a career-defining achievement. For Wedding, it was something else entirely. He finished 24th. The result did not come with injury or visible collapse. There was no dramatic fall, no single mistake to blame. It was a clean loss. And that distinction mattered. The Olympics did not open a new chapter for him. They closed one. After Salt Lake City, Wedding did not linger on the circuit or reframe the outcome as experience gained. He stepped away from elite competition altogether. The structure that had organized his life since childhood disappeared almost overnight. What remained was a problem few people noticed at the time. Wedding had been built for dominance within a system. Once that system was gone, there was nothing left to contain his ambition. The question was no longer whether he would excel, but where that drive would go once the arena that shaped it no longer existed. In the early 2000s, British Columbia was widely known as the center of Canada's marijuana trade. Production was common, enforcement was uneven, and penalties were light compared to the profits on offer. A pound of high-grade cannabis could double in value the moment it crossed the US border. For those willing to move products themselves, the margins were extreme. Marijuana was not treated like organized crime. It was framed as a gray market hustle, a low-risk business operating in plain sight. That framing mattered. It allowed people who would never have considered themselves criminals to justify participation. For Ryan, it offered something more important than money, a new arena. He drifted into Vancouver's nightlife and took work as a bouncer. He began spending more time in the gym, adding size and leaning into a physical identity built around control. This was not survival work. He was not struggling to pay rent. He was constructing an image. Around him, Vancouver's gang ecosystem was evolving. Groups like the Red Scorpions and the United Nations Gang were competing for visibility, while more established organizations, such as the Hells Angels, maintained quiet influence. The city's criminal culture wasn't driven by desperation, it was driven by status. Wedding fit into this environment easily. He wasn't motivated by need, he was motivated by scale, by aesthetics, by the sense that power could be built and displayed. With financial backing from his father, Wedding took a different route than most street-level dealers. He secured a loan of roughly $250,000 and entered real estate. On the surface, it was legitimate. In practice, it gave him privacy, space, and insulation. A condominium became a grow operation. Later, the operation expanded into warehouse-scale production. According to police intelligence and informant accounts, thousands of marijuana plants were cultivated at once. Firearms were kept on site. The product was processed and prepared for distribution at a scale far beyond casual dealing. At street value, the operation was worth millions. In 2006, police raided one of the grow sites. They found plants, weapons, and clear signs of an industrial operation. But when it came time to lay charges, investigators ran into a familiar problem. The structure had been designed to keep Ryan at arm's length. Ownership was layered. Aside from informant testimony, there was little that legally tied him to the operation. He walked away without charges. The lesson was simple and dangerous. Small operations attract attention. Larger ones, if structured correctly, can absorb it. Scale didn't just increase profit, it created distance. For Ryan, that realization didn't slow him down. It confirmed that he was thinking the right way. In 2009, Ryan Wedding left Canada and traveled to San Diego to finalize what he believed was the next step forward. Marijuana had been profitable, but cocaine was different. Higher risk, higher reward, and a gateway into a much larger market. The meeting was supposed to lock in a deal. 24 kilograms of cocaine paid for in cash. What Ryan didn't know was that the seller wasn't a cartel intermediary. He was an FBI informant. The moment Ryan entered the United States, the rules changed. Every phone call he made was recorded. Every movement was logged. When agents moved in, they found $100,000 in cash hidden inside his hotel room. The recordings filled in the rest. His voice, his intent, the structure of the deal. The case was airtight. His associates broke almost immediately. Faced with federal charges, they cooperated, took plea deals, and distanced themselves from the operation. Ryan did the opposite. He refused to flip. In court, he barely spoke. Agents later described his presence as unsettling. He wasn't panicked. He didn't posture or plead. He carried himself like someone who believed the situation was temporary, a setback rather than an ending. Even the judge took notice. Ryan appeared to underestimate the seriousness of what he was facing. The conviction came quickly. A federal prison sentence followed. For law enforcement, the arrest looked like a win. A former Olympian caught in a controlled sting, his network exposed, his future curtailed. But the assumption underlying the case that prison would interrupt his trajectory would turn out to be wrong. This wasn't the point where Ryan Wedding exited the drug trade. It was where he entered it properly. Ryan Wedding served his sentence at the Metropolitan Correctional Center in San Diego. Inside, Wedding was no longer dealing with peripheral players. He was surrounded by cartel intermediaries, traffickers, and distributors tied directly to international supply chains. These were people who understood routes, volume, payment structures, and enforcement. For the first time, Wedding was exposed to how cocaine actually moved from source countries, through transit corridors, and into destination markets. According to agents involved in the case, the transformation was visible. Publicly, Ryan expressed remorse. Privately, intercepted conversations told a different story. He wasn't reflecting on how to leave the drug trade. He was gathering information, making contacts, and positioning himself for what came next. The consequences of that access would surface years later, at a scale few had anticipated. While incarcerated, Ryan married. The details of the ceremony were kept private, but what followed drew the attention of US prosecutors and financial investigators. His wife presented as a legitimate businesswoman. She operated luxury-facing ventures, high-end goods, vehicles, and services that generated large cash flows and appeared clean on the surface. According to federal allegations, those businesses served a different purpose. They moved money, they absorbed the proceeds. They converted drug revenue into assets that could travel without attracting attention. He moved product. She made sure the profits survived. Later, investigators identified a second woman in Ryan's orbit, based in Colombia. Unlike his wife, she was not tied to front-facing businesses. Her role, according to authorities, was intelligence. She tracked movements, gathered information on rivals, and relayed warnings that helped Ryan stay ahead of both law enforcement and competing networks. She was never charged, but her name appeared in financial and communications records tied to the organization. Together, these relationships reflected a pattern seen in mature criminal enterprises. Violence mattered, but it wasn't the foundation. Money was. Cash flow determined loyalty. Liquidity determined survival. As long as the money moved cleanly, the empire could keep functioning, quietly, efficiently, and at distance. For Ryan Wedding, this was no longer about individual deals. It was about building a system that could run without him in the room. After his release, Ryan Wedding didn't rebuild slowly. He scaled immediately. What emerged was a tightly organized cocaine pipeline stretching across continents. Cocaine sourced in Colombia moved north through Mexico, entered the United States through Los Angeles, and then traveled onward into Canada. From there, distribution extended further into Europe and beyond. This was not opportunistic smuggling. It was structured logistics. Investigators estimate that the network moved as much as 60 tons of cocaine annually, generating revenues that exceeded $1 billion a year. At that level, success depended less on aggression and more on consistency. Missed shipments, unpaid debts, or erratic behavior got people killed. Wedding avoided those mistakes. Law enforcement believes this reliability is why he was protected by the Sinaloa cartel. The cartel didn't shield him because of loyalty or identity. They shielded him because he delivered. He was discreet, avoided public attention, and kept product moving on schedule. As long as the routes stayed open and the money flowed, he remained valuable. Protection in this context wasn't ideological, it was contractual. As the investigation widened, the cost of that system became clearer. One of the government's key witnesses was murdered in Colombia before he could testify. The killing sent a message that extended beyond a single case. Cooperation carried consequences, even across borders. Around the same time, US Treasury sanctions exposed the breadth of Ryan's support network. Financial records and intelligence reports pointed to bookkeepers responsible for laundering proceeds, jewelers who helped convert cash into portable assets, and individuals with military or special forces backgrounds who provided security and enforcement. Authorities also identified ties reaching into the United Kingdom, further confirming that the operation did not stop at North American borders. By the time these details surfaced publicly, Ryan Wedding had already disappeared again. The roots remained. The money continued to move. Ryan Wedding did not disappear by accident. Investigators believe he altered his appearance through plastic surgery, changed his grooming repeatedly, and moved constantly. He avoided routines, avoided phones tied to his name, avoided anywhere permanence could form. At the same time, he was not operating alone. Law enforcement maintains that cartel protection insulated him, providing safe passage, warning systems, and temporary shelter when pressure increased. Jurisdiction mattered. If Ryan was in Mexico, the FBI could not simply move in. Any action required cooperation from local authorities, coordination that took time and leaked easily. In regions where cartel influence was strongest, cooperation itself could be dangerous. Protection was reinforced not by loyalty alone, but by fear. People who talked did not stay anonymous for long. That reality produced a paradox that defined the case. Ryan is a 6'3" white man with a distinctive build, someone who should stand out immediately. And yet, for more than a decade, he has remained effectively invisible. Not because no one sees him, but because no one who sees him talks. When traditional methods stalled, authorities changed tactics. The FBI released photographs believed to show Ryan in recent years. Some were intimate, others were outdated. A reward of up to $15 million followed. At that level, silence becomes expensive. Around the same time, arrests were made within his broader network. His wife was sanctioned. A Colombian girlfriend was publicly named. Each move narrowed the circle of people who could safely protect him. Ryan Wedding remains missing. He has not made a public statement since 2011. He has no attorney speaking on his behalf. Meanwhile, federal prosecutors have filed additional charges, including conspiracy and murder-related allegations, tied to an ongoing criminal enterprise. There is no arrest photo, no courtroom, no sentence. Only the unresolved question that now defines the story of Ryan Wedding. Will this end with handcuffs or with a body?